The alien girl heard human music and completely lost herself. Zara stood at the observation window of the orbital station, looking down at the blue planet below her. People had been watching Earth for 3 cycles now, studying the humans and their strange ways. She was a cultural analyst for the Caltherian Expeditionary Fleet, and her job was to understand these peculiar beings who had somehow managed to split the atom before achieving global peace. The Caltherians were not conquerors. They never had been in their long history of spacefaring civilization. They had encountered hundreds of species and welcomed them all into the galactic community. But humans were different somehow. They were chaotic, unpredictable, and utterly fascinating. Zara had spent months reviewing human transmissions, everything from their news broadcasts to their entertainment media. She had studied their wars, their art, their literature, and their sciences. But nothing had prepared her for what she was about to experience. It started when her colleague Ven brought her a data crystal containing what humans called music. Zara had heard musical compositions before the Caltherians had their own traditional harmonies, calculated and perfect mathematical expressions of beauty designed to soothe the mind and promote clarity of thought. Human music, she was told, was something else entirely. Zara inserted the crystal into her personal terminal and activated the playback function. The first few seconds were unremarkable, a simple rhythmic pattern that seemed almost primitive. Then the melody began. Her body responded before her mind could process what was happening. Her pulse quickened. Her breathing deepened, and something inside her chest seemed to expand and contract, in rhythm with the sounds. The humans had organized noise in a way that bypassed all rational thought and spoke directly to something primal, something she did not even know existed within her. The song was called Blue by an artist named Etta James, and it made Zara feel things she had no words for in her language. The woman's voice was rough and smooth at the same time, carrying emotions that Caltherians were taught to suppress from childhood: pain, longing, desire, and a strange kind of joy that came from embracing sadness. When the song ended, Zara sat in silence for a long time. Her hands were trembling. She played it again and then again. By the 5th repetition, she realized she was crying, actual tears streaming down her face. Something that had not happened since she was a child. Ven found her like that hours later, still sitting in the dark, listening to human music on repeat. "What has happened to you?" he asked, his voice concerned. "I do not know." Zara replied honestly, "I do not understand what this is." Ven listened to a few seconds of the music and shrugged. "It is interesting, but hardly worth this level of emotional response. Perhaps you need to visit the medical bay." But Zara knew this was not a medical issue. This was something far more profound. She had discovered a crack in the carefully constructed walls of Caltherian emotional control, and human music had torn that crack wide open. Over the following days, Zara became obsessed. She stopped attending briefings, stopped reviewing reports, and spent every available moment consuming human music. She discovered jazz and felt her soul swing to rhythms that seemed to break every rule she had ever learned about musical structure. She found rock and roll and felt rebellion surge through her veins. For the first time in her life, she listened to classical compositions by humans named Beethoven and Mozart, and wept at the mathematical beauty hidden beneath raw emotional expression. Her supervisor, Commander Thala, summoned her to his office. "Your performance has become unacceptable," he said, his silver eyes narrowed in disapproval. "You have missed 3 strategic planning sessions and your reports are overdue. What is the cause of this behavior?" Zara tried to explain, but the words felt inadequate. How could she describe what music did to her, how it made her feel alive in ways she had never experienced, how it made her question everything she had been taught about the proper way to exist? Commander Thale listened with growing concern, then made his decision. "You are to cease all exposure to human music immediately. This is clearly having a detrimental effect on your mental stability. You will report to the medical bay for evaluation and counseling." But Zara could not stop even when she tried to focus on her regular duties. Her mind wandered back to the songs she had heard, melodies played in her head during meetings. Rhythms pulsed through her thoughts when she was supposed to be analyzing data. She had become addicted to feeling, and music was her drug. She began to sneak away to isolated sections of the station where she could listen without being monitored. She discovered headphones, a human invention that allowed her to carry the music with her everywhere. She went, the music became her constant companion, her escape from the rigid structure of Caltherian life one night. She found a song called "What a Wonderful World" by Louis Armstrong. And something inside her broke completely. The simple message of finding beauty in everyday things, of seeing the world through eyes of wonder rather than calculation, went against everything she had been taught. Caltherians were raised to be logical, analytical, and emotionally restrained. But this song asked, what if life was not about control? What if it was about experiencing everything with an open heart? Zara made a decision that would change her life forever. She would go to Earth. The plan was dangerous and probably insane. No Caltherian had ever made unofficial contact with humans. The protocols were clear. Observation only, wait for the humans to develop faster than light travel on their own, then make first contact through proper diplomatic channels. But Zara did not care about protocols anymore. She needed to understand where this music came from. She needed to meet the beings who could create such powerful emotional experiences. She stole a personal transport craft, a small vessel designed for short-range reconnaissance missions. It took her 3 days to reach Earth, and every moment of that journey she listened to human music, building up her courage for what she was about to do. She landed in a city called New Orleans at night, in an area that her research told her was relatively unpopulated. The landing was rougher than she intended, and she damaged one of the craft's stabilizers. But that did not matter. She was here. She was actually on Earth. Zara had studied human biology extensively, and she knew that Caltherians could pass for human. With minimal modifications, her people were humanoid in shape with similar proportions, but their skin had a slight blue tint, and their eyes were larger than human eyes. She used a temporary genetic modifier to adjust her skin tone and wore colored contact lenses to make her eyes appear more human. She dressed in clothes she had synthesized based on human fashion databases and looked at herself in a reflective surface. She could pass not perfectly, but in low light or from a distance. No one would notice. Zara stepped out of her craft into the warm, humid air of New Orleans night and nearly fell to her knees. The sensory input was overwhelming. Real air, not recycled and filtered through station systems, carried scents she had no names for: spices, cooking food, flowers, and something else. Something organic and alive. Sounds filled the air. Not just music, but voices, laughter, the hum of primitive vehicles, and the buzz of insects. She had studied Earth, but studying and experiencing were completely different things. Zara walked through the streets following the sound of music her sensors had picked up. She walked for 20 minutes, passing humans who barely glanced at her. They were too absorbed in their own lives, their own conversations, their own small dramas to notice the alien walking among them. Then she heard it: live music pouring out of a small building with a sign that read, "Preservation." Zara stood outside for a long time, listening, her heart pounding. This was real music, being created in real time by real humans, not a recording, not a transmission, but actual living art happening right now. She gathered her courage and walked inside. The space was small and crowded, with humans sitting on benches or standing along the walls at the front of the room. 6 humans played instruments, a combination of brass woodwinds and percussion, creating a sound that was raw and imperfect, and absolutely beautiful. Zara found a spot along the back wall and simply listened. The music was jazz. She recognized the style from her studies, but hearing it live was entirely different. The musicians were not following a precise score. They were improvising, creating melodies in the moment, responding to each other in a conversation that needed no words. The trumpet player was an older man with dark skin and gray hair, and when he played, his eyes closed and his whole body swayed with the music. He was not thinking about what he was doing. Zara realized he was feeling it. He was letting the music flow through him and transform into sound. Tears began streaming down Zara's face again, but she did not care. Several humans around her were also crying, were also swaying, were also lost in the music. This was what she had been missing. Her whole life, this connection, this ability to feel without shame, to express without calculation, to be alive without apology. When the song ended, the crowd applauded, and Zara joined them, clapping her hands together in the human gesture of appreciation. The musicians smiled and began another song, and then another. Zara stayed for the entire performance, 2 hours of pure emotional experience that left her exhausted and exhilarated. after the show ended and the crowd began to disperse. Zara approached, the trumpet player, her hands shaking. "That was beautiful," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The man smiled, a warm expression that reached his eyes. "Thank you, darling, you look like you needed that." "I did," Zara replied. "I really did." "What is your name?" he asked. Zara almost gave her real name, then caught herself. "Lisa," she said, using a human name. She had prepared. "I am Charlie," the man said. "Nice to meet you, Lisa. You visiting New Orleans, yes?" Zara said, clinging to the cover story she had prepared. "I am here to learn about music." "Well, you came to the right place." Charlie said, "This city breathes music. You can feel it in the air." "I can feel it," Zara said, and it was true. The whole city seemed to pulse with a rhythm that was absent from every other place she had ever been. Charlie studied her for a moment, then said, "You want to really understand music, you should come to the second line tomorrow afternoon." Zara did not know what a second line was, but she nodded. "Yes, please, I would like that." Charlie gave her an address and a time, then patted her shoulder gently. "You got a good soul, Lisa. I can tell you're going to fit in just fine hereafter." Charlie left. Zara walked back through the streets toward her hidden craft, but she did not return to it. Instead, she walked for hours exploring the city, listening to the music that poured out of bars and clubs and even from street corners where individual humans played instruments for passing crowds. She found a park and sat on a bench watching humans interact. Couples holding hands, friends laughing together, children running and playing. Without the rigid structure that Caltherian children were subjected to, these humans were messy and chaotic and beautiful in their imperfection. As the sun began to rise, Zara finally made her way back to her craft. She climbed inside and sat in the pilot's seat, staring at the communication console. She should report in, let her people know where she was, but she could not bring herself to do it. Returning to the station meant returning to a life of emotional suppression, of denying everything she had discovered about herself. She made another decision: she would stay on Earth for a while longer. Not permanently, just long enough to understand what she was feeling. Just long enough to experience more of this incredible human culture that had awakened something inside her. The next afternoon, Zara followed Charlie's directions to a neighborhood filled with colorful houses and narrow streets. She heard the music before she saw anything else. Drums and brass instruments playing a rhythm that made her body want to move. Then she turned a corner and saw a parade of humans dancing through the street behind a brass band. They were not marching in neat rows like Caltherian ceremonial processions. They were dancing wildly, joyfully, each person moving in their own unique way, yet somehow all part of the same collective experience. Charlie saw her and waved her over. "Come on, Lisa," he called out. "Get in the second lines." Zara hesitated, but Charlie grabbed her hand and pulled her into the crowd of dancers. At first she felt awkward and self-conscious. She did not know how to move like this. Caltherians did not dance. But then the music surrounded her and her body began to respond on its own. She found herself jumping and spinning, and waving her arms in the air. She found herself laughing, a sound that burst out of her. Unexpectedly and purely, other humans around her smiled and encouraged her. They did not judge her awkward movements or her obvious inexperience. They just welcomed her into their celebration. Zara danced for hours until her legs ached and her lungs burned, until sweat soaked through her clothes and her face hurt from smiling. She had never felt so free, so alive, so completely herself. When the parade finally ended, Charlie introduced her to some of the other musicians: a woman named Lisa, who played saxophone, a young man named Marcus, who played trombone, and an older woman named Pearl, who played drums. They invited Zara to a small restaurant where they ate food that was spicy and rich and completely unlike the bland nutritional supplements Caltherians consumed. They told stories and laughed and argued about music with a passion that Zara found infectious. Pearl looked at Zara with wise eyes and asked, "So, Lisa, what brings you to New Orleans, really?" Zara hesitated, then decided to tell as much of the truth as she could. "I was in a place where I was not allowed to feel things," she said, "where expressing emotion was seen as weakness. I heard music, and it made me feel alive for the first time, so I came here to understand why." Pearl nodded slowly, like she understood exactly what Zara meant. "Baby," she said, "music is the language of the soul. It bypasses all the walls we build around ourselves and speaks directly to who we really are. That is why it is so powerful and why some people are afraid of it. Zara felt tears forming again. Why does it make me cry so much, she asked. Because you got a lot of feeling built up inside you, Pearl said, and music gives you permission to let it out. That is what art does, it tells us. We are allowed to be human. Zara almost laughed at the irony of that statement, but she caught herself and just nodded over. The following weeks, Zara embedded herself in the New Orleans music community. She attended concerts every night. Sometimes multiple shows. She met musicians and dancers and artists of all kinds. She learned about blues and gospel and funk and second line and all the other styles that had been born in this incredible city. She also learned about the history of this music, how it had emerged from pain and oppression, how enslaved people had created beauty and joy despite unimaginable suffering, how music had been a form of resistance and survival and celebration, how it carried the stories and spirits of people who had been denied their humanity. This moved Zara deeply. The Caltharians had never experienced oppression as a species. They had been fortunate to develop in relative peace. But these humans had suffered terribly, and yet they had created the most beautiful art she had ever encountered. They had taken their pain and transformed it into something that could heal not just themselves, but anyone who listened. One night Zara attended a small club where a singer named Amy was performing blues songs. Amy was young, maybe in her late 20s, with dark hair and an old soul that showed in every note she sang. When Amy sang a song called Stormy Monday, Zara felt like the woman was reaching inside her chest and pulling out emotions she did not even know existed. The song was about heartbreak and loneliness, but also about resilience, about getting through the hard times and surviving. After the show, Zara approached Amy nervously. That was incredible, she said. Amy smiled. Thank you. What is your name, Lisa? Zara said, still using her alias. Amy studied her with intelligent eyes. You are not from around here, are you? No, Zara admitted. I am from very far away. I nodded. I thought so. You got this. Look like you are seeing everything for the first time. Zara laughed softly. That is accurate. You want to get some coffee? Amy asked. I am too wound up to go home yet. They went to a 24-hour diner and talked for hours. Zara told Amy a version of her story about growing up in a place where emotions were suppressed, where she was taught that feelings were weaknesses to be overcome. She told her about discovering music and how it had changed everything. Amy listened without judgment, then shared her own story about growing up in poverty, about struggling with depression, about using music as a way to process pain and find meaning. We are all looking for the same things, Amy said. Connection, understanding, a reason to keep going. Music gives us that. It reminds us we are not alone. Zara felt a connection to Amy that went beyond their conversation. This was what humans called friendship. She realized not the formal collegial relationship she had with other Caltharians, but something deeper, a bond based on shared vulnerability and mutual understanding. As weeks turned into months, Zara's life on Earth became more real than her life on the station. She stopped thinking about returning, stopped checking her communication devices, stopped caring about her mission. She was Lisa, now a woman who had come to New Orleans to find herself, and in many ways that was the truth. She got a job working at Preservation Hall, helping to set up for concerts and clean up afterward. It did not pay much, but she did not need much. She had learned to live simply, to find joy in small things: a good meal, a beautiful sunset, a perfectly played melody. Charlie became her mentor, teaching her about music history and taking her to places that tourists never saw. They visited the grave of a musician named Buddy Bolden, who Charlie said had invented jazz. They walked through neighborhoods where famous musicians had lived. They ate at restaurants that had been serving the same dishes for 100 years. Pearl taught her about rhythm, about the heartbeat that underlies all music, about how everything in life has a tempo if you listen carefully enough. She taught Zara to play drums, simple patterns at first, but gradually more complex rhythms that made her body move involuntarily. Marcus taught her about improvisation, about letting go of control and trusting the moment. He let her try his trombone and laughed good-naturedly when she produced nothing but horrible squeaks. But he was patient and encouraging, and eventually she managed to produce something that almost resembled music, and Amy became her closest friend. They spent hours together talking about everything and nothing. Amy taught her about the deeper aspects of human emotion, about how pain and joy were not opposite. But partners about how you could not truly appreciate happiness without understanding sadness. One night after a particularly powerful performance, Amy and Zara sat on Amy's apartment balcony looking up at the stars. Do you ever feel like you do not belong here? Amy asked. Not in New Orleans, but like on Earth in general. Zara's heart skipped a beat. Why do you ask? I shrugged. I do not know. Sometimes I feel like I am different from everyone else, like I can see things they cannot see or feel. Things they do not feel, like maybe I am supposed to be somewhere else. Zara was quiet for a long moment, then said, I think everyone feels that way. Sometimes we all feel like outsiders in our own lives. But what if you really were from somewhere else? Amy said. What if you literally did not belong? Zara looked at her friend, wondering if somehow Amy had figured out her secret, but Amy was just staring at the stars, lost in thought. I think home is not about where you are from, Zara said carefully. It is about where you feel like you can be yourself. Amy smiled and squeezed Zara's hand. I feel like I can be myself with you. Zara squeezed back the gesture, feeling tears form in her eyes again. But these were good tears. Tears of gratitude and connection, but Zara's borrowed life could not last forever. One evening, as she was walking home from Preservation Hall, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Another Caltherian standing on a street corner watching her. It was Ven, her former colleague. Zara considered running, but she knew it was pointless. Ven had found her, and that meant others knew where she was. She walked over to him, her heart pounding. You need to come back, Ven said without preamble. The commander is furious. You stole a craft. You abandoned your post. You have been gone for almost 4 months. I cannot go back, Zara said. You do not have a choice, Ven replied. The fleet is preparing to move to the next system. If you are not back on the station in 48 hours, you will be left behind permanently. Part of Zara wanted to be left on Earth to continue her life as Lisa. But she knew that was not realistic. She had no legal identity, no real way to support herself long term, and eventually someone would notice that she never aged like a human, that she had no family, no past, no medical records. I need time to say goodbye, Zara said. You have 1 day, Ben said. Then I am coming to retrieve you personally. He gave her the coordinates where her craft was hidden. Apparently they had located it weeks ago and had been watching her, waiting for the right moment to make contact. Zara spent the next day in a daze. She went through her normal routine, but everything felt different. Every moment was colored by the knowledge that it was one of her last. That evening she gathered her friends Charlie, Pearl, Marcus, and Amy at Preservation Hall. After the regular show had ended, she had asked Charlie if she could use the space, and he had agreed, asking no questions. When they were all seated, Zara stood in front of them, her hands shaking. I need to tell you all something, she began, and it is going to sound impossible, but I need you to listen. She took a deep breath and told them everything. Her real name, her real home, the fact that she was not human, that she had come to Earth because their music had touched something in her that she did not even know existed, that she had to leave tomorrow and might never return. The silence that followed was deafening. Charlie spoke first, his voice gentle. Baby, are you having some kind of breakdown? Do you need us to call someone? No, Zara said. I know how it sounds, but it is true. She pulled out a small device from her pocket, a Caltherian medical scanner, and activated it. The holographic display showed her real biological structure, the differences from human physiology that no human technology could fake. Pearl leaned forward to look at the display, then sat back. Slowly, Lord have mercy. Marcus just stared, his mouth open. Amy stood up and walked over to Zara, looking into her eyes, searching for something. This time Amy said softly, You are not human. No, Zara replied. But everything I told you about myself was true. I was raised in a place that suppressed emotions. I discovered music and it changed me. I came here to understand, and I found more than I ever expected. I found friends, I found purpose, I found myself. Why did you not tell us before? Charlie asked. Because I was afraid, Zara said. Afraid you would reject me, afraid you would be scared. I just wanted to be one of you. Pearl stood up and walked over to Zara. She looked at her for a long moment, then pulled her into a hug. Baby, you are one of us, she said. Human or not, you got soul, and that is what matters. Charlie, and Marcus joined the hug, and finally Amy wrapped her arms around all of them. "We're going to miss you, Lisa," Amy said. "Or Zara, whatever your name is." "Zara," Zara said, tears streaming down her face. "My name is Zara." They spent the rest of the night together, playing music, telling stories, and laughing through their tears. Charlie played trumpet, Pearl played drums, Marcus played trombone, and Amy sang, and Zara sat in the middle of it all, surrounded by the people who had taught her what it meant to truly live. As the sun began to rise, Amy sang one last song. What a Wonderful World, the same song that had broken something open in Zara all those months ago. But this time it was different. This time she was not alone. When the song ended, Zara stood up. "It is time," she said. They walked with her through the quiet morning streets to where her craft was hidden. When they reached the location, Zara deactivated the camouflage field and the small spacecraft became visible. "Lord have mercy," Pearl said again. Charlie whistled. "That is something else." As Zara turned to face her friends, "I want you to know that meeting you changed my life," she said. "I came here looking for understanding, and you gave me so much more. You gave me friendship, acceptance, and love. You showed me that feeling deeply is not a weakness, it is the greatest strength of all." "Will you ever come back?" Marcus asked. "I do not know," Zara said honestly. "But I hope so." She hugged each of them one last time. "Saving Amy for last." "Thank you," Amy whispered in her ear. "Thank you for trusting us." "Thank you for everything," Zara replied. She climbed into her craft and started the launch sequence as the engines powered up. She looked out the window at her friends standing there watching her leave, and she knew that, no matter what happened next, no matter where she went or what she did, she would carry this time with her forever. The craft lifted off silently and rose into the sky. Zara looked down at New Orleans growing smaller below her, the city that breathed music, the city that had taught her what it meant to be alive. When she docked with the station 3 hours later, Ven was waiting for her along with Commander Thale and 2 security officers. "You are under arrest for theft and abandonment of duty," Commander Thale said. "I know," Zara replied. "I accept whatever consequences." You decide. She was confined to quarters while they decided her fate. She expected to be court-martialed, perhaps imprisoned, but she did not care. She had experienced something that most Caltharians never would. She had felt truly alive, even if just for a few months. But the hearing went differently than she expected. The council listened to her story, and instead of punishment, they were curious. They asked questions about human music, about the emotional impact it had on her, about what she had learned. One of the elder counselors, a woman named Sireth, spoke up. "What you describe is concerning," she said. "Emotional instability is dangerous, but it is also intriguing. We have spent millennia suppressing our feelings in the name of rationality, but perhaps we have lost something important in the process." Another counselor disagreed. "If we allow emotions to rule us, we will become as chaotic as the humans." "But are they chaotic?" one of the younger counselors asked. "Or are they simply more alive than we are?" The debate continued for hours. Finally, Sireth called for order. "We need more information," she declared. "Zara will be reassigned to a new role, Cultural Integration Specialist. She will continue to study human music and its effects. She will determine if there is something we can learn from humanity's approach to emotion." Zara could hardly believe it. They were not punishing her. They were encouraging her research. "But there are conditions," Commander Thale said. "You will work within proper protocols, no more unauthorized contact. You will observe from the station and document your findings." Zara agreed, though she knew that observing from a distance would never be the same as experiencing. She spent the next 6 months writing reports, analyzing music, and trying to explain to her people what she had discovered. But words felt inadequate. How could she describe the feeling of dancing in a second line, or hearing Amy sing the blues, or watching Charlie play trumpet with his eyes closed? Her reports created controversy among the Caltharians. Some thought she had been corrupted by human influence. Others were intrigued and wanted to know more. A small group even began listening to human music themselves, though they did so cautiously, afraid of being overwhelmed. Then something unexpected happened. The council decided to accelerate first contact with humanity. They had been planning to wait another decade, But Zara's reports had convinced them that humans had something valuable to teach, and that the Caltherians might benefit from the exchange. Zara was chosen to be part of the first contact team, not as the leader, but as a cultural advisor. Her experience living among humans made her uniquely qualified when the day came, and the Caltherian ship descended to Earth, landing in a carefully chosen location that had been negotiated with world governments. Zara felt her heart racing. The official first contact took place in Geneva, with representatives from nations around the world. It was formal and diplomatic, and nothing like the warm, chaotic human interactions Zara had experienced in New Orleans. But after the official ceremonies were complete, after the speeches and agreements and photo opportunities, Zara asked for permission to visit New Orleans again, this time openly as herself. She walked into Preservation Hall on a Tuesday night, and Charlie was there getting ready for the evening show. He saw her and his face broke into a huge smile. "Zara," he called out, "you came back." The other musicians gathered around her, asking questions about her world, about space travel, about whether aliens liked jazz. "We do," now Zara said. "At least one of us does." That night Zara played drums with the band Pearl had taught her well. And while she was not as skilled as the human musicians, she held her own, and more importantly, she felt the music, not just heard it, but felt it in her bones, in her blood, in her soul. After the show, Amy found her. They sat on the steps outside the hall, looking up at the stars, which seemed closer now that Zara's people were here. "So what happens now?" Amy asked. "Are your people going to study us like lab rats?" "No," Zara said. "We are going to learn from you. You have something we lost, or maybe never had the courage to feel deeply, to live fully, to create beauty from pain." Amy leaned her head on Zara's shoulder. "That is quite a compliment. It is the truth." Zara replied. Over the following years, the Caltherians and humans began a cultural exchange program, carefully controlled at first, but gradually more open. Young Caltherians came to Earth to study human art and emotion. Humans went to Caltherian worlds to teach and share their culture. Not all Caltherians embraced the change. Some held firm to the old ways, rejecting emotion as weakness. But others, like Zara, found a new path. They learned to balance rationality with feeling, logic with passion, control with expression. And at the center of it all was music. Human music that had started it all, that had cracked open a door that could never be fully closed again. Zara eventually became an ambassador, traveling between worlds, teaching Caltherians about human culture and helping humans understand her people. She never stayed in one place for long, but she always returned to New Orleans, always returned to Preservation Hall to play drums with Charlie, and listened to Amy sing. 10 years after first contact, Zara stood on a stage in front of an audience that included both humans and Caltherians. She was there to give a lecture about cultural integration. But instead she did something different. She picked up drumsticks, walked over to a drum set, and began to play a simple rhythm Pearl had taught her long ago. Then Charlie joined her on trumpet. Then Amy began to sing, and the music filled the hall. Some of the Caltherians in the audience looked uncomfortable, fidgeting in their seats, but others began to sway, began to feel the rhythm, began to let down their guard and simply experience. And in that moment, Zara knew that the journey she had started all those years ago when she first heard a human sing, the blues, was not just her journey. It was the beginning of something much larger. The transformation of an entire species, because music is a universal language. It speaks to something fundamental in all conscious beings. The desire to feel, to connect, to be part of something larger than ourselves. As the song ended and the audience applauded, Zara looked out at the crowd of humans and Caltherians sitting together, and she smiled. "We are all just looking for the same thing," she thought. Connection, understanding, a reason to keep going. And sometimes the answer is right there, in a simple melody, in a rhythm that makes you want to dance, in a voice that reaches inside you and reminds you that you are alive. The alien girl had heard human music and completely lost herself. But in losing herself, she had found something far more valuable. She had found her soul, and that was worth everything.